Freedom Watch is much more than an organization, a nonprofit that fights government corruption. We are there for freedom, whether that's political freedom, ideological freedom, or economic freedom. In fact, the name of Freedom Watch, before it was changed, was the International Center for Economic Justice. 2.5 years ago, in my own name, as a consumer, I brought a lawsuit against the PGA Tour and its commissioner, Jay Monahan. I included other organizations as well, the Official Golf World Ranking, the DP World Tour, which is the European Tour, and Golf Channel, which is owned by NBC. I alleged in that complaint that those corporations and whatever, in fact, the PGA Tour is a nonprofit, if you can believe that, were colluding to restrain trade to eliminate a new competitor, Live Golf, from the market. I filed the lawsuit. It was assigned to Judge Luis Delgado, who at the time seemed to be very neutral and very fair. We proceeded. The PGA Tour filed 2 motions to dismiss. It lost at both times. But the case languished for 2.5 years, perhaps because this judge has a docket of over 1,000 cases. This is in the circuit court in Palm Beach, Florida, and there just aren't enough judges, and these judges don't have law clerks, unlike federal judges. But I also think that over time, this judge saw perhaps the risks to him, because the PGA Tour is represented by some very powerful law firms. And most of these state court judges want to ultimately become federal judges because they get the clerks, they get the prestige, they get lifetime tenure. And I think he got scared. He got scared of the power of the PGA Tour and its commissioner, Monahan. During the course of those 2.5 years, very little discovery was allowed. I was only able to take 2 depositions, relatively limited. In addition, documents were produced by Tiger Woods, by Rory McIlroy, by Davis Love III. All of those documents were kept secret. In this country, you do not have secret Star Chamber proceedings. That's one of the reasons why in 1776 we broke away from the British Crown, because legal proceedings are to be open to the public. Well, this judge kept most of the stuff secret, and at 2 points he even ordered the deposition of Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, which he then stayed. He stayed virtually all discovery. Well, lo and behold, 2.5 years later, he was presented with a proposed order by the PGA Tour and Monahan, which contained false information. And I always got the impression when he came into court that he wasn't fully prepared because of his caseload, and maybe he simply didn't want to be prepared in many ways. Well, the judge issued an order dismissing the case, mostly without prejudice, so it can be filed in another form. That happened just the other day. But I was so incensed to see that he really didn't do his homework, that he didn't really look at the facts carefully, and that he relied upon false facts provided to him by the PGA Tour and Monahan. He had previously dismissed OWGR and the DP World Tour, the European Tour, and Golf Channel as well on insufficient grounds and insufficient reasons, in my opinion. So I immediately filed an appeal. But this is something that goes beyond an appeal. It's dealing with putting forth false facts to a judge, which he relies upon. And I have a separate cause of action. So watch what happens. Because if this is not resolved amicably, and I'm seeking to do that with the court and with the PGA Tour and with Commissioner Monahan, which of course they won't do, then I'm going to have to file a complaint alleging fraud. And that'll be against the PGA Tour, and that'll be against Commissioner Monahan, and the judge will be implicated in that as well, because he went along with this, and it's clear to me that he didn't do his homework, he didn't do his research. I have no animus towards the judge. I think he's a good man. I think he succumbed to the pressures of the case. It became unbearable. He had so many pleadings, but the most egregious thing is that he kept everything confidential. And the documents produced by Tiger Woods in particular, they did not want to have released. I had asked for documents bearing on the alleged anti-competitive conduct, and those are being kept secret. So I hope that we will get a court order eventually to have those documents released. They were classified as confidential, contrary to a confidential protective order. I'd hope to have that adjudicated last Monday. That was yesterday. And of course, because of the judge's dismissal last Friday, it didn't happen. But it's very, very important. I've talked about the courts for a long time, and I generally believe that the state courts in Florida are much better than the federal courts. Judges give you hearings, and you can see them face to face. But in this instance, the judge simply did not do his job for whatever reason. And I don't know if it was because he thinks that somehow there's going to be pushback if he ever applies to become a federal judge by these very powerful law firms that represent the PGA Tour Monahan. And another interesting fact, the lawyers that represented Tiger Woods that fought tooth and nail, that disparaged me and disparaged, frankly, Liv continuously in this case to try to keep Tiger Woods from being deposed. And I actually had him in a deposition room once, and the judge called that off. These lawyers are the same lawyers, if you can believe this, who brought the case for the woman who remembered over 40 years later that she was, quote, raped by Donald Trump. And they got the case in front of a very leftist judge in New York City with a leftist jury. And of course, Trump was found liable for that as well as defamation. Interesting that those lawyers that Tiger Woods would hire were, in fact, the lawyers of E. Jean Carroll, the woman who went against Trump trying to influence the election that's ongoing, that'll come to fruition on November 5th. And the local counsel of those lawyers, and those lawyers' names are Kaplan, Hecker, and Fink, appropriate with the word Fink, I might add, in that regard. The local counsel was David Marcus, and he represented Hillary Clinton with regard to a case that Trump had brought claiming RICO with regard to the Russian collusion investigation, the witch hunt that occurred. So there's a political element here. And the PGA Tour and Tiger Woods are closely aligned with the Democrats, with those interests. Those, of course, those interests tried to kill any agreement between Live Golf and the PGA Tour, which was announced a year ago, June, because they didn't want to see there to be any involvement of Saudi Arabia. And in fact, Saudi Arabia is our ally, it is our friend. It's probably one of our three best allies in the world. It owns a lot of American interests, including Disney in part, Boeing, Apple, and others. And we should thank the Saudis that they want to invest in golf. And Live is a fine organization and should not have been disparaged. It's a long story, but I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. It's an interesting story. The fat lady has not sung. This case will be back in court shortly in one manner, shape, or form. And the PGA Tour and Monahan will be held accountable for inducing this judge based on false facts that were unverified. There was no discovery in dismissing the case. Stay tuned, because we're just getting rolling. But it is very important that we have competition in this country, whether it's the golf industry or anything else. People should be allowed to compete, and entities should be allowed to compete on their own merit, not on the alleged anti-competitive conduct of the PGA Tour, Commissioner Jay Monahan, whether it was in conjunction with official golf world ranking, which denied world ranking points to Live players, and the European Tour, which along with the PGA Tour suspended and fined players. In fact, these players are independent contractors. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. See about this case. It's very interesting. And support us with tax-deductible contributions. We are your Justice Department. You have no Justice Department in reality. The only Justice Department that you have, we know what they do. God bless you. God bless America. God save America. Remember, the Father and Son will only help us if we help ourselves. I'll be back tomorrow with another special podcast. And remember, economic freedom is just as important as political freedom. Thank you for listening to me.